If every share of stock, slice of real estate, gold bar, and piece of modern art lived in one always-on digital ledger that anyone could verify in real time, well, would you trust markets more, or would it kind of freak you out? Well, the United States might actually get that chance, and the surprise hero in our story today is Chainlink. So here's the twist that grabbed me. I used to assume that the US already owned the tokenization race. I mean, the dollar rules the stablecoin game, right? Must be home turf advantage. Then I kind of read the latest work coming out of the Chainlink Labs government affairs team, and yes, yikes, the dollar's name is everywhere, but a lot of the plumbing that actually moves those dollars actually lives offshore. So maybe the US jersey is on the scoreboard, but the game's being played in someone else's stadium. Now that kind of grabbed, at least gap, is the entire plot of tonight's story. So let's rewind and set the basics so that we're all running on the same field. Tokenization is just kind of taking something that you recognize, property, stocks, art, even gold, or digital rights, and representing it as a token on the blockchain that can be owned, moved, or traded. Simple idea, huge consequences though. Now some estimates, say tokenized assets could reach $16 trillion by 2030. That's 16 trillion. Now that's not a kind of rounding error, that's a new lane of global finance with headlights on full beam. Now, why is the US in such a strong position to lead on this then? Well, the Chainlink Labs team, they point to kind of straight at the trifecta. This is deep capital markets, world-class financial institutions, and a long nosy history of inventing financial instruments that scale. So whether you love or groan at Wall Street, it's hard to deny that when the US kind of builds pipes, the rest of the world often hooks in. That legacy still matters. But here is where the plot thickens. Even though more than 99% of the roughly $210 billion stablecoin market is tied to the US dollar, many of the actual stablecoin platforms aren't sitting on US soil. So yeah, the label says dollar, but the servers, the companies, the legal wrappers, often somewhere else. That kind of means the influence without full control then, right? It's kind of like having your brand on the jersey while another team runs the playbook. Now, stablecoins though, they are kind of the pro league, right? The report makes this kind of killer analogy that I love, right? So think of stablecoins as emails, right? Remember when the internet was for email, right? And then boom, entire industries followed. In the same way that digital dollars get people kind of comfortable sending value over blockchains. But what comes next dwarfs that first use case. Decentralized finance, DeFi, is pushing towards a neutral kind of financial layer that doesn't care about the borders, the banking hours, or the holiday closures. And that is where the US either steps in with smart rules and technical rails, or risks watching others set the standard. Now, let's talk about the roadblocks that show up in neon, anytime that big institutional money even glances at a blockchain asset. And that's compliance, right? Now, if tokenized assets are going to scale, right, the compliance checks, can't live in a spreadsheet in some back office that reconciles once a week, right? They have to live with an asset, right? Now, compliance has to be automatic. It has to be verifiable and, frankly, kind of boring, but in the best possible way. So until that happens, big money kind of sits in the lobby holding the fire exit open, but never really coming on inside. So that is why I perked up when I saw that Chainlink launched something called ACE, built to tackle on-chain compliance and make the space friendlier for institutional capital. So if you've ever watched a hedge fund lawyer try to understand wallet addresses, you know that this matters. Now, the real need, or the need is rather real, I should say, right? Large players, they can't touch assets without identity checks, jurisdiction limits, and eligibility rules travel with, those assets and update live. Now, ACE is aimed right at that pain point. So what does the US actually need to do to actually win this tokenization race? Well, the Chainlink team, guidance lands in 3 words. It's clarity, it's confidence, and it's coordination. Sounds pretty simple in a conference room, brutal in policy, tech, and of course market practice, right? Still, it is the path, and the US has to make tokenized financial products reliable. And I mean the kind of reliable where a pension fund manager can sleep at night, and also easy to buy, settle, and track in real time. Not, T+2, not call your broker. It's click, settle, done. All right, let's zoom in on one of the building blocks, the identity oracles. So if tokenized assets are cars, identity oracles are the license plates that prove who's driving, who's allowed on which road, and whether the vehicle passed inspection. Now, on-chain identity data can actually show things like KYC and AML verification, right? Whether the investor is accredited and whether that person is allowed to hold a certain class of assets in a given geography. Now, that is the trust layer that regulators, squint for. Without it, scale is just a fantasy. But identity alone doesn't close the loop, right? The big breakthrough described in the report is something that they call a unified golden record. So picture a single smart data container that travels with the token. Inside, you got who owns it, what compliance rules apply, and what pricing data matters, and whatever else institutions need to kind of check the box. Now, the record updates continuously. It's easy to verify. Regulators can see what they need when they need it. Now, market participants aren't juggling 5 data feeds that disagree. It's this kind of, transparency is exactly what is missing, or the missing kind of plank, between blockchain experiments and the trillion-dollar capital flows. Now, here is where Chainlink steps from narrator to, main character, right? According to a 2024 report cited by the team, Chainlink is currently the only platform that supports all the capabilities needed to make those unified records actually work across the messy, multi-chain reality that we live in. That's a pretty bold position, right? But it's also backed by the stack that they've been rolling out for years. And if you followed Chainlink even casually, then you would have heard about CCIP, the cross-chain interoperability protocol. Rather than trying to kind of cram the entire financial future onto one chain like squeezing a city into a studio flat, CCIP lets tokenized assets and their data move securely across many different blockchains. Now, that flexibility isn't a nice to have, it's survival. Now, institutions use different stacks, regulations vary, and liquidity will pop up in very weird places. So if the data that kind of proves compliance cannot travel, the asset might as well just be bottled on the floor. Scale check then, right? Chainlink's CCIP is already securing more than $18 trillion in on-chain value, nearly as much as the entire US GDP. So let's let that sink in, right? Whether you kind of nitpick measurements, methods or not, we're talking giant numbers that signal serious usage and trust. That's not, or at least this is not a kind of hobby project that's coded in a dorm room over energy drinks, right? These are the rails that are already kind of carrying the freight. Add Chainlink, I should say, and Chainlink isn't the only, building tech after all, right? They're lobbying, they're partnering, and they're cheerleading. One effort that kind of stood out to me was teaming up with the Blockchain Association on something that is called Tokenized in America initiative, right? And the goal is to spotlight how, all 50 US states are getting involved with blockchain and real-world asset tokenization. That's a subtle but powerful move because policy in the US often bubbles from, states upwards. Now you can track the state labs and you see the national kind of future forming. Now, let me pause and bring this down from policy kind of helicopter view to ground level. Suppose you and I own a small slice of tokenized commercial building. Now we each hold tokens that represent fractional ownership. Rent rolls, charged kind of monthly, tenants come and go, local zoning shift, insurance requirements change, a regulator kind of update, reporting it rules, for example. And in the off-chain world, this is a complete mess of PDFs, lawyers, and calendar reminders that someone's always going to forget something. Now, in a tokenized system with a golden record, well, all those rule changes can be tagged to the asset's data container. So when the rule changes, compliance logic updates. And when rent hits, cash flow updates. Regulators kind of peek in without subpoenas and fax machines. And suddenly, fractional property investing quits being a barstool fantasy and starts actually to feel like a brokerage account. So you might be thinking, this is a cool dream, but why the US? Can't Singapore or Switzerland just do it first and everyone follow? It's a great question, right? And actually, those countries are already moving pretty fast, along with the UAE. And they're setting up some pretty decent examples, right? Now, that's kind of part of the urgency here, right? The US still kind of has a strong chance to lead, of course, but only if it acts with, again, clarity, confidence, and real coordination between the public and private sector. So the clock is not waiting. Okay, let's talk investors, retail, institutions, everyone in between, right? Now, if the US steps up, right, what changes for us? Well, liquidity windows potentially open, settlement speeds shrink, access broadens, and the big one, right? More trust because compliance lives on the asset. Now, that lowers the regulatory fog. It discounts market supply to anything new. Will this, instantly moon prices? No, right? This is infrastructure, not fireworks, right? But better plumbing kind of tends to attract bigger flows over time. All right, quick pit stop because I promised you that I'd always be straight about how this channel runs. Now, I personally use Kraken Pro for trading, and there's an affiliate link that lives in the description. So if you use it, it supports the channel here at no extra cost to yourself. It's totally your call, but thank you if you choose to check it out. Now, speaking of learning together, we also run a free educational Discord server. The link's also in the description. So if you want to ask questions about tokenization, Chainlink, stablecoins, or how identity data might matter for you as an investor, jump in. It's chill, friendly, and full of people tinkering with the same questions that you have. And you know what? Let's kind of hit the hard reality checkpoint here, or at least right here, because enthusiasm without caution is how wallets get wrecked. And this one might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video should be treated as entertainment and educational purposes only. Good, you needed that. Now we can get on and keeping our eyes, I guess, wide open. So, how does ACE plug into the bigger kind of arc of things and the bigger picture? Remember, institutional capital wants rules enforced at machine speed. Now, ACE is aimed at that on-chain compliance. Think identity checks, eligibility filters, and the logic that says this wallet can hold this type of token under these conditions. So when you stack ACE with identity oracles and the golden record model, you start getting a full compliance fabric, not just a kind of patch. And that's the difference between demo day and multi-trillion-dollar adoption. Now, here's a fun mental model. Stablecoins were the inbox, right? DeFi is the browser, and ACE plus golden records is the search index plus access control. So when you get those layers, people stop asking whether the technology works and start building businesses on top of it. Okay, let me circle back to the earlier kind of contradiction then, right, that I kind of hinted at. I started this journey thinking that the US dominance in stablecoins meant that the US had the tokenization race wrapped up. But because so much stablecoin infrastructure actually lives outside of the United States, that dominance is paper thin, right? The US can still win, of course, but only if it builds the rails at home that global capital trusts more than offshore workarounds. And that goes double if, other countries keep pressing fast forward. Another angle that we should acknowledge here is that regulators, right? They want visibility, but they hate fragile integrations. A unified golden record, continuously updated, verifiable, regulatory friendly, gives them a window without forcing them to reinvent their own tech stack every quarter. Now, that kind of visibility reduces friction and legal overhang, and markets, well, they like that. So let's say the US leans in. What would everyday investors see first? Well, probably cleaner, easier access to tokenized financial products, funds that settle in real time, fractional exposure that doesn't require, accredited hops, if rules follow, and dashboards where you can actually see compliance status without calling a broker. It's the boring stuff, right? It's buy, settle, track that would just work. And when boring gets solved, well, interesting tends to follow. And by the way, if you do test the waters and you're kind of trading crypto as part of your research journey, Kraken Pro, again, the affiliate link that's down in the description, has been solid for me so far. Using that link helps keep the research coming and helps me keep the Discord free. Let's widen back though to global context for a second. Singapore, Switzerland, and the UAE are already moving hard on tokenization. So they're not waiting for Washington's gridlock to clear. So the signal the US sends next, policy guidance, tech pilots, public-private sandboxes, will matter quite a bit. So if the US shows clarity, capital will show up. If it hesitates, others will just fill the gap. And markets, they hate a vacuum. Somebody always is building. Now, remember the Tokenized in America initiative with Blockchain Association. Well, I'm fascinated by this because when you spotlight how all 50 states are engaging, you kind of create a scoreboard. States, they do compete after all, and some pass friendly frameworks, others attract startups. So let's think of it like tech tourism for capital markets then. Which state is friendliest to tokenized instruments this year? Once that conversation starts, well, policy momentum becomes a self-feeding loop. Okay, let me give you a human picture of what success could look like 5 or 10 years out from now, without adding any numbers beyond what the kind of report already highlighted. So you log into whatever wallet front end wins the user experience wars, right? Your dashboard shows you tokenized slices of property, a regulated fund that pays yield in a stablecoin, and maybe a fractional art token that you grab because you liked the artist, right? Each asset kind of shows you at least who can legally hold it, whether you can still qualify, when the last compliance ping hit, and real-time pricing piped through Chainlink. So if you decide to rebalance, settlement happens fast because the rails understand the rules baked into each token. And regulators watching the aggregated data feed can see systemic kind of risk before they actually explode. And that's is a bit of a promise that the space that we're kind of stepping into here. Now, we're not guaranteed to get there, of course, but the building blocks are visible. Identity oracles, the unified golden record, on-chain compliance through tools like ACE, on cross-chain movement via CCIP, and of course, real policy work across all 50 states through Tokenized in America. Stack those on top of the US capital markets, and suddenly the country isn't just following the tokenization wave, it's kind of steering it. Okay, let's hit the ground with one more reflection, right? When email first showed up, nobody guessed that streaming video, social networks, or rideshare apps would ride those early protocols. Stablecoins are that early email moment, but for finance, right? The really weird stuff, right? Or wild stuff, I guess, that can happen. The trillions of tokenized assets that could move 24/7 across chains and jurisdictions with rules baked in. That's the broader internet moment that we just haven't fully lived yet. Now, before we wrap up, here's a quick reminder. Hop into the free educational Discord. The link is in the description. If you want to kind of keep this conversation going, people are already sharing their thoughts on Chainlink, tokenization, ideas, and how compliance layers might hit portfolios. It's a good spot to ask questions about without kind of feeling a little silly. After all, there's no silly questions. And yes, one last transparent note, if you do decide to open or fund an account on Kraken Pro, the link down below is an affiliate link that supports this channel. No pressure, total gratitude if you do use it though. So, can the US win the tokenization race? The ingredients are sitting on the counter, right? Deep markets, institutions ready to move, a tech stack from Chainlink that already secures more than $18 trillion in value, and a policy map that could light up 50 states. Now, the missing variable is action, with clarity, confidence, and coordination. I'm watching, and I hope you are too. So hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next story and the next video. But for now, you might want to check out the video that's lining up on the screen right now.